Great, right. Well, I'll just do the intro. So first of all, in the spirit of reconciliation, Brain Science Network acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So I'm on Annawan land here in Armidale, and if you know whose lands you're on, you might like to type that into the chat. So welcome to our fifth Outside the Bubble series. We are the EMCR Brain Science Network, and we're aligned with the Australian Brain Alliance, and our core aim is to establish a platform for brain scientists who are also early mid-career researchers to develop into future leaders and drive Australian brain science forward. And Louisa's just going to share a PowerPoint with our LinkedIn and other information. I think, anyway, yeah. And yeah, so welcome. It's great to have you all here. Louisa, do you want to kick off with introducing Christina?
Yes, thank you so much, Deb. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be having this wonderful panel today. So we're very privileged to have with us two professionals who have been previous brain scientists and now have taken jobs, as you say, outside the bubble of academia. So I'll introduce Christina Sabarodin, who is currently working as a user experience researcher. So Christina has earned a PhD in 2021 from Monash University in Melbourne and focused on researching functional connectivity and psychosis. And following a postdoctoral position at the University of Calgary in Canada, transitioned to industry in 2023 as a user experience or UX researcher, now currently working at the Commonwealth Bank, helping to shape inclusive, user-friendly digital experiences.
And so I'll introduce James since this was my idea. So James earned his PhD from the University of Sydney in 2015, a few years after me. In fact, we were there at the same time. Hey, fun times, James. So James's PhD was on heart rate variability, as I recall. And I remember a lot of presentations about how bad the science in heart rate variability was. And I wonder whether this kicked off James's interest in digging out bad science. So after his PhD, James worked for a year as an Endeavour Research Fellow in Poznan in Poland. Then he moved to Boston, where he worked as a postdoctoral fellow at Northeastern University for just under 4 years, I think, finishing up in July 2020. This is the point at which James left academia to work as Chief Scientific Officer at Cypherskin, which was a startup, I think. Is that a startup, James? Anyway, looking at wearable sensor technologies for sports and performance. And then a couple of other startups, Alleviate Diagnostics and SafeBeat RX. This is all gleaned from James's LinkedIn. He's an affiliated researcher at Linnaeus University, so he's somewhat inside the bubble still. Co-founder of Fuel My Day Foods, and now director of the Medical Evidence Project, which is funded by the Centre for Scientific Integrity, and finally getting paid to do something he's been doing all along, which is calling out bad science, in this case, specifically bad medical science. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about that soon. So just a couple of admin things. Please type your questions in the chat. For this session, we've disabled Q&A. We're just going to do the chat. We'll keep questions anonymous as the recording will be publicly available, so your names won't be read out. We'll just read out the questions. And yeah, that's a bit. So for each of you, would you like to tell us how you got to your current position and what you were doing within academia and what you're doing now, just to kick things off? Maybe we'll start with Christina.
Okay, I can start. I did not prep for this, so it might just
That's
be
all right.
like a word vomit. But you know, it's been like the story that I've been telling all the interview panels every time I go to like a job interview. So before I started academia, I actually have a background in design. So I've been working as a designer for a few years, and then did psychology and followed a PhD, which was sort of like a happy accident. I didn't plan on doing a PhD, but you know, I met my supervisor at the time, was really interested in the research, and I pursued that. But before I was doing a PhD, I knew that there's this area called UX design that needed both psychology and design expertise. And reading a bit about it, I was like, that's my plan B. If academia doesn't work out, that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, so I did my PhD same time as Louisa. Actually, we were sitting in the same building. And I had a great time doing a lot of like, imaging analysis and correlating that back to psychosis traits. Really, really enjoyed my time. But I graduated when COVID hit. And so I had to make some pandemic decisions at the time. So I finished, I think, my PhD in 2021. And then my partner at the time, he was also finishing up his PhD in Belgium. And the only place where we could live together was Canada. And so we moved to Canada, managed to get the same job, sorry, different jobs, but at the same university. And during that time, it was really, really quiet. So it was 2021, I think. And I had a lot of time to think and soul search. And then I revisited the whole UX design again, upskilled. And I was lucky to live in a place where they were trying to diversify their local industries to tech. Managed to get some kind of like, like volunteer positions, working as a UX designer, researcher for like a nonprofit organization. And then when our contracts were finishing up, my partner got a job as a postdoc at UCID. And I was like, what, great, I'll have to find a job in Sydney. And then I applied. I found out that there's, as part of UX design, there's also an area for research. So it's like a design research where we help, make, validate and whether any design decisions that's going to get put out there in the public is user friendly. And so I got really interested in the finance space. And I'm very passionate about, usable design and things like that. And then got my first job at a company called Zip Money. And then I worked there a couple of years. And then I joined the bank about in January, doing what I do now. So yeah, that's sort of like the background.
Great. And James,
Yeah.
what about you?
Well, it's a many and varied story. Incidentally, before I start, it's easy to remember here. I am on the traditional lands of the Massachusetts people, as might be expected. One of the many names here that people don't actually realize is immediately derived from the tribe who lived there before Uncle Sam turned up. Yeah, it's a fascinating story that I don't have time to get into, which is a terrible shame because I'm prone to distraction. Let's do all of it reasonably quickly. As Deb said, I got a postdoctoral fellowship before I finished my PhD. I wanted to go somewhere unusual. I didn't want to go to the US or the UK. And I did fairly sort of arcane cardiovascular signals research. And the place where they had all the data and were super psyched about me coming to visit and spend the Australian government's money was in Western Poland. So I went to Western Poland because that was interesting. My now wife got a job at Harvard, so I had to go back to Boston. Eventually, also the fellowship ran out. So I went back to Boston. I was sitting around trying to figure out exactly what to do next. This is a very big city, but you can't just click your fingers and then have academic work fall from the sky. It doesn't work like that. Someone emailed me from a lab at Emerson University, which is one of the smaller universities out of the 5 million in Boston, and said, you wrote this methods paper. Can you tell me how this works? And I thought, this is an opportunity, and it was 1 PM. And she thought she was emailing someone in Australia. And I said, I'm happy to come around and show you. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. So as opposed to getting an email 24 hours later from the other side of the world, I just got the train into town, found the lab, and showed her how the code worked. And on that basis, they helped me look because I was useful and interesting. Got a postdoc. Was something of an indifferent postdoc. I don't think I was particularly good at it, mainly because I have a sort of primary academic obsession that started and took hold very properly during the first one, which is I think that bad research, actively bad research, is a problem that we do not take seriously enough. And I started to essentially develop my own methods to research that because I thought it would be interesting. And I just did that because I had the compulsion to. And that was a background that played throughout the entire time of my postdoc, which was still in cardiovascular signal management, etc. So physiology and engineering and everything else. I had made the determination then that my primary obsession was never going to get me any academic work, so I looked to go elsewhere, and I had a friend who started a physiological signals-driven device measurement thing. And so we talked for a while. Eventually, he raised a whole bunch of money, and then during the plague, I went from a postdoc to being the CSO of a company that had, at one point in time, 31 full-time employees, most of whom were scientists and engineers. And I had to manage them, which was a fun transition. Most startups are difficult, and that went the way as the vast majority of them do. And I bounced around a few others, and then finally started my own, which I still have. And now, very recently, as in 3 weeks ago, I have still been pursuing what I'm most interested in, which is what we call forensic metascience. This is a research area to basically not just do research on research in the abstract sense, but in the very granular sense in terms of should this paper exist or not. I went a fairly long way myself into formalizing that stuff, and finally, we found an outlet where I could basically raise money and do that as a job. And it took that long. So from beginning to end in that sense, it was 10 years and 2 months. From graduating from my PhD to ending up in a place where everyone I talk to seems to agree that it's a good idea. So that's a while. That's a depressing subcurrent to this conversation. Let's leave it there. That's plenty of details. I've probably gone too long.
No, that's great, James. Super interesting. My next sort of cue question is, how are things now? So what might a day or a week in your current role look like? So, what do you do from day to day? So Christina, do you want to start off with that?
Yeah, I can start. So it's very different from academia. That's for sure. Day to day, there's a lot of meetings, a lot of talking to people, a lot of stakeholder management. The kind of research that I do is qualitative research now. So there's a lot of field work where, a week. So for instance, like a couple of weeks ago, I just finished up a concept testing where I had to interview with a colleague, of course. We tag team and we interviewed 12 users, and then that would take a few days in the week, and then writing up a report, presenting it back. There's a lot of alignments and stuff with stakeholders in between. So I would say a typical week for me, if there's field work, a lot of interviewing on the spot with customers, and if there's no field work, there's a lot of like meetings and alignments on what to research next, what research requests are coming in, what sort of technique or methods should we use for this request, and a lot of pushback as well. Sometimes people come in to us and request for research requests. They have research requests where they actually don't need research. So there's a lot of that sort of thing as well. Yeah, I don't know really. It's very hard to sort of get it down in like one very cohesive sentence of what I do, but there's basically a lot of meetings and a lot of alignments and actually running the research projects. Yes.
Christina, I'm actually not familiar with the term alignments. Could you kind of explain that one, maybe?
Alignment, it's basically just getting all the stakeholders in one place, one meeting, one room, and making sure we understand what it is that we're doing. Like if there's a research objective, making sure that we really nut it down to what that objective is, because sometimes when you work with so many people, a designer might say, hey, I need this research for XYZ, but then someone else might go like, hey, actually no, we need it for blah blah blah, and then as a researcher you're like, oh, okay, so what's the objective here? So there's a lot of that alignment, as we call it, to do before we actually start anything.
So getting everyone on the same page. Sort of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
What about you, James? I'm sort of disappointed to hear that there are many meetings outside of academia, because meetings are one of the least favorite things of mine of academia. Do you need to go to meetings a lot, James, or
No,
what are your days? Excellent. What are your
no,
days sort of look like?
I worked for a startup for several years. Meetings are
Mm.
considered to be a cancer. I
Excellent.
used to announce at my first role. I used to, because obviously, I mean, I was an executive, had access to everyone's salaries. I used to announce at the beginning of the meeting how much money the meeting cost, to put it into perspective.
I tried to do that in
Which,
my ethics committee once, and no one wanted to listen to me. Sorry, go on.
well, I mean, it's much easier to do when the salaries are public, as they
Mm.
probably are when people have bands. But you know, I mean, people were frequently upset, especially as a large meeting, to find out that someone else who was investing in us was paying us $1,300 to talk about whether or not we like the peanut butter that's in the snack bar. So no, that doesn't happen, and generally I control my meeting schedule. Any time that I get back out of something like that, I immediately hand to everyone else. Every goal, every half-hour meeting I enter, I try and get out by about 20 minutes, simply so people can have things back. And if people waste my time, well, let me put it this way: people are not allowed to waste my time because I have very little. What a typical day right now, and this is reasonably straightforward. I still am doing quite a lot of consulting that is on academic due diligence stuff. People ask me for advice because I spend a lot of time thinking about policy issues, academic reform, other elements of. Sorry, it's been incredibly hot here today, and I'm losing skin from my face. But also the forensic metascience is also a lot of commercial applications. So I often have consulting work that I'm doing in parallel to what I'm doing. And obviously, and generally, I prefer a consulting relationship where I'm working by myself or directing people to immediately bring me things as soon as possible for a lot of money, and then reporting to one single person who decides whether or not I'm doing good or bad. Likewise, for the medical evidence project, which is what I mentioned before, the agenda is mine. I meet Ivan, who's the retraction watch guy, as I found out everyone calls him. I meet him twice a week for 30 minutes and try to use less than those 30 minutes. When it comes to making phone calls, I mean, I had a day last week that had 7 phone calls in it, but 3 of them were journalists, 2 of them were people who wanted to tell me stories, and 2 of them for the consulting work because I have to meet people through networks. Those aren't meetings with an agenda or formal everything. I think one thing that people lose in academia is just how much time is spent just meeting people in the rest of the world, and how much hinges on how those interactions go and what is said and whether or not it sparks something in other people. We made a tremendous mistake when we called it networking, because networking sounds and is an artificial nonsense designed by awkward people to try and force a structure onto regular social interaction. And you can tell by my charming personality how well a lot of this goes for me sometimes. So how do we structure this into a day? Generally, I get up about 7. Right now, I do MEP stuff till about 1. I eat lunch over the sink like a hobo, and then I try to do as much consulting as possible so I don't have to work all weekend on the same day. So this is very similar to the pressure and the hours of academic tasks. But that's only because I have sort of half academic time, and then the other half is sort of completely self-led. And if I don't work well, then no one can pay me. But this is what I have chosen to do, and it's not something that you will find me complaining. This is an alternative to working in a large company and being subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So, you know, that this is a decision and it's a trade-off. It still feels worth it. A lot of people wouldn't want to do it, honestly. And I would respect the emotional fidelity of someone telling me that. I think it's a sensible thing to want to live in another way.
Neat. Thanks, James. So for both of you, I guess you've sort of some of this has already been answered, but what particular factors influenced your decision to leave academia? So Christina, It seems like a lot of it was circumstantial for both of you.
Yeah, it was circumstantial. I'll start first if you don't mind, James. Or
I like you starting first. You sound more sensible, and I get to listen to.
a few things, Jeb. So when I was doing my postdoc, it wasn't, I think, in an ideal situation, given it was the pandemic. It was very quiet. I went for a very technical postdoc where I was working mostly with engineers, and then I started questioning the why. Why are we measuring this? Like, I studied psychology to get closer to human behavior, and then I was getting further and further away from it with all the measurements and the numbers. And I think I was just missing the motivation. And I think the thing is, like, I went to Canada where if you're a postdoc, you're considered a trainee. And that was a bit difficult to process because I already, took up, and I went back to uni as a mature student, and then, worked, and then did my undergrad all over again, did a postdoc, and did a PhD, and then went to postdoc, and I was considered a junior, or like didn't even have the same rights as a PhD student. Was getting paid less than an RA. Was really difficult for me to process that. I did all the work, and it was really difficult to make ends meet. And also there was lacking the why. Why am I doing this work? And I was pretty much working on my own most of the days, just running lots and lots of plots on MATLAB. And I just went back to why am I doing this? What was my intention, and what fills my cup? And I was looking back at, like, I started with design because I was interested in XYZ, and then I studied psychology because of XYZ, and then I just married the two whys, and then I pursued that. And then so when I did my sort of volunteering at this NGO in Canada, it was like the first time when I realized that people outside of academia were actually working together. When we synthesize data, it was like a group activity. I mean, not a big group, but you're not on your own all the time. And I think that's what I was missing, a bit of that collaboration. And yeah, I think I was lucky when I got in when I did, because after I got into UX, the economy sort of crumbled, and then the market became saturated, and it became really difficult to get a job in UX.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those things make huge swathes of decisions for hundreds of thousands of people. When markets move, when tastes change, things like that. And then Christina may be incredibly excellent, and there's simply maybe no capacity supported within a place or a market to be able to do something. And that happens in an enormous amount of areas, which is generally why people recommend, one, the ability to pick up and learn individual skills that are parallel to what you already do, because there's something that you may wish to move to because it may be some combination of you're interested in it, or even if you're just interested in it enough, but it also presents a series of opportunities. So a lot of people in computer science can be particularly good at this. Get laid off from something and then emerge 6 weeks later as a somewhat credible expert into something they've just been slashing away at really hard. So, my answer to this is very specific to me, and therefore I don't think it's too interesting to everyone else. And it's simply the fact that I am not congenitally suited for academic environments. I didn't have a straightforward, good academic pedigree where I met lots of nice people who agreed that supporting my career was a particularly good idea. I am the way I am, and I'm interested in the stuff that I'm interested in. And I'm amazed that I had the patience to pretend that it was otherwise for as long as I did. That is simply how it came about. It would have happened sooner, but there were visa issues here in the US. If I was in Australia, it would have been a completely different story, or in Europe, anywhere where work rights are much more straightforward than they are here, or it would have played out differently. There isn't a place for, and look, this may happen a lot. I think this has happened. Plenty of people have been kind of orphaned by circumstance in terms of they're interested in an academic project, or a method or a theory or a space or something that has great fidelity to them. And then everyone else in the rest of the world goes, we didn't presuppose the need for someone who does this within whatever we have available. And you have situations where things become trendy for absolutely no reason, and then there's 200 or 300 jobs with several thousand people who are interested in having those jobs across even large countries that have good structural research funding. You can quickly find yourself in a place where the system didn't presuppose that you would be in it. In many respects, you should consider me and Christina to be the normal ones, in the sense that the vast majority of people in most fields do a graduate degree and leave. That's been how it works everywhere for a very long time. And the fact that I imagine a lot of people listening are social scientists, that's reasonably high. It's not as high as something like mining. Only 10% of people who do a PhD in sort of mining geology stuff end up staying within the academy, for the simple reason that it's incredibly lucrative and interesting to dig things up out of the ground elsewhere, because that's where literally all our minerals, rare earths, metals, and oil come from. And so there is an enormous amount of, and not to mention everything else we need to know about what's beneath the surface of the earth for, say, building everything, or what is going to happen to a water table over time. So there's almost no one who's sort of left behind. Everyone grows up with a culture of like, well, at some point in time, I guess I'll leave. But that changes a lot between individual fields, but it is more normative now. I'm sorry for saying all of that. It's not my direct experience. I just think my direct experience is because I'm odd, and I think that's more useful to know for everyone else. At least I hope it is.
I think you'd be surprised to find most, like a lot of people end up in academia because they don't really fit anywhere else. So I don't know that being not a great fit is that ununiversal an experience. I don't know, but I mean, like having known James a long time, I was kind of surprised he stayed in academia that long, and like it's interesting that you give me the reasons there. But I always thought that you would end up outside of academia.
Well, generally
knowing
people
you.
don't ask. We are not that interesting. It's not fundamental. We're all not that interesting to each other. Generally, people don't want to go around plumbing my motivations. So now you know.
So, Louisa, sorry. Oh, yeah. You know, but like at the same time, I do think, yeah, that might be useful to other people. If you think there's something wrong with me, maybe it's just that there's something wrong with academia, you know. So,
I always thought that.
yeah, and that's what you're currently involved in, sort of uncovering, which I find really interesting. Well, maybe we'll hear a bit about that in the next little while. But I was going to hand over the questioning to Louisa because I'm getting too wordy here.
Thanks, Deb. I'm noticing it's just after 10:30, so I was wondering if we could potentially check if there are any questions from the audience. So when I go to the chat, probably people can add them, but does anyone who's attending wish to ask any questions to our panelists today?
I can't see any questions from people attending yet. Maybe you want to chuck one in while we wait, Louisa.
Yes, I can just see the chat from mine is just saying hosts and panelists. So I hope we're not missing part of the chat. But I was interested in following up something that you said, Christina, about when you were thinking of moving back into the idea of the user experience space and you upskilling. So part of that was the volunteer work, but what did you actually do prior to kind of putting yourself out there? So did you do an online course or what was it?
A lot of things. So yeah, I did do a course, and I remember I was at a conference. I think I was at my last conference ever in academia, in 2022, and then at lunchtime people were networking and I was there doing my assignments. Like, oh, okay. So I did do the course and I did network locally. I just reached out to people on LinkedIn, like, hey, can I chat with you 10 minutes? And that's how I found out about the volunteer, and then yeah, got my portfolio together. I was going for either UX designer or UX researcher role, and then only because I found out that UX researcher was a thing, and there's actually a lot of people from academia that are working in UX research now. It's not uncommon that I meet people who have a PhD, and so I was going for that. And yeah, I think there was a lot of prep, and the biggest thing I think for me was brushing up on my business lingo, because I think like when you said, like what does alignment mean? That was something that I had to learn. How do I speak that business language? Collaborators to stakeholders, getting someone on the same page to alignments, KPIs, OKRs. And I mean, I do have to speak like that every day, but it's because everyone speaks the same language, just like academics have your own language. So yeah, a lot of that, speaking that way, and getting my portfolio ready and making sure that I can, showing that I can do the job, that I'm not just someone. And, I think the concern that people outside of academia have when they hire academics is that we're very theoretical. And so just making sure that I do understand the real world impact of, research and, good design and things like that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I suppose a question to both of you, coming through academia, often we have like mentors, supervisors, other people. Are you at all in contact with the people that might have been mentoring you or supervising you during your doctoral training?
I'll let James go first.
The short answer is not really, but that is, in a lot of cases, some of those relationships weren't amazing for me. And I also kept moving between fields until I sort of came up with my own, I suppose, in a way. And I lack a lot of sentimentality, and some of them were far from ideal. I mean, frankly, it reminded me that there's a few people I'd really like to call, because obviously I did have some good relationships during the process. But, I mean, that's a really good question. Like, honestly, like when I joined academic labs multiple times, that's a question that I would ask like people there. It's like, can I talk to the people who used to be here? Didn't go and work somewhere once because someone treated that question as like a really weird thing to ask. Why would you want to talk to the people who left? Like, I want to talk to the people who left exactly the same reason you want to talk to the people I used to work with. So can I talk to them or not? The answer was not, and then we didn't work together. Christina, what about you?
Yeah, not really. I had a great PhD supervisor, but then we just don't have that, I guess, shared interest, or like I think he was very good at like mentoring the academic track, but then outside of industry, like I don't I don't know how he could have mentored me there. I mean, we did stay in touch for like a year after I left academia, but that was just basically to just make sure that I'm still approving any publications that had my name as a co-author. But yeah, no, I think we've lost touch. But in saying that, if I go to Melbourne, I'll probably give them a visit. But I'm still in touch with all of my, my peers that I did a PhD with. There's some of them are still my really good friends. So yeah, that's still my contact with the academic world, and my partner is still, in academia. So I do hear all that, that little like academic gossip from him. So
I know plenty of people who had great supervisory relationships where I think once a year would be frequent past a few years. I mean, there's always there's a tremendous and ongoing sense of gratitude there, but at the same time, the same time, like I had plenty of people who I used to work with who I don't call time. I have other projects that I've done where I worked very closely with someone for a very long time, and we had plenty in common. I don't like I would say, even if it's civil, it is exactly as Christina described it. Because a point in time where your interests are sufficiently diverged that you you end up kind of relying on that as a crutch for how you end up talking to other people. And I don't think that's something that people should be upset about. Like, we're all supposed to have amazing relationships with everyone all the time. It also becomes literally impossible past a certain point. Look, very selfishly, I do something. I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I will admit this to you. I hope sometimes that when I do something and it's very widely reported, I hope that people I like or I haven't talked to for a while will find me, so I don't have to go back into my admittedly terrible memory for people, names, and faces and try and remember what the hell is going on. That's actually a good motivation for me to try and push things out as much as possible. I just because it's nice. Like, I know what people who've heard of the thing will do. It's just sort of you end up doing that, and then you think, am I monstrously cynical, or is it just what being an adult ends up being because there's only so much downtime in the day? Some people are amazing at that. I'm sure Christina, you have, like me, have worked with people who are astonishingly good at other people, and they know everyone, and they somehow manage to preserve the relationship that they have, and they have this way about them. And even if you're me and you're surly and unpleasant, a lot of the time you still really like these people because everyone likes them. They're like human Labradors, and at the same time, without the eating out of bins and making a lot of noise, they can be really amazing. It's a tremendously good, being incredibly personable and having even just sort of the requisite skills to be able to get through the day is a tremendous way to be successful. I wish I could manage it. I can't. I tried.
It's good to hear that one can be successful without those skills, though, James. So don't feel it's my
Yeah.
forte either. So,
There you go.
yeah, James isn't as gnarly as he likes to think, I reckon. But anyway, your video's turned off. Never mind. So actually, oh, there you go. Video's back on again. So we've got some sort of starter questions here, but I actually wanted to, James, you said something earlier that intrigued me. You said that forensic medicine has commercial applications, which I was kind of surprised by that. So what are the commercial applications of forensic medicine?
Well, it's pretty straightforward.
If you're allowed to say.
Of course, I'm allowed to say it's pretty straightforward. I'd like everyone to know. Say you have a company and the company's 2.5 years old and the company does science stuff. Some of it is published, some of it is internal, some of it is done with people who still work at the organization. Some of it is done by people who have already left the organization. Say it's reasonably well organized, but it's not amazing. And then say you want to give them $15 million to buy 10% of your company. Would you pay me $50,000 to see whether or not you were going to lose many, many millions of dollars? The answer, the answer for, in some sense, has been yes. Like, I'll tell you briefly about like some other sort of related work. If you are a private foundation and you wish to evaluate grants, you can't do what the NIH in America can do, which is call up all the experts and go, all of you come to Washington right now and sit in a horrible room in Bethsaida, Maryland, sit and make all the decisions about people. You can't do that. You have to get your own. The way that you get your own is you pay people. So grant evaluation for private foundations is enormously expensive. And if the grant sucks, not because the content is bad, but because it's poorly written, poorly structured, underpowered, there may be a situation where they're giving people several millions of dollars, but it will actually make sense to give them more several millions of dollars because of how the research is constructed. Can you pay someone to figure that out and then ask them to send all the information in advance? Or to go away because their project is terrible, or to accept more money? You can do all of that by talking to someone like me, because again, criticism. These is and a lot of this stuff is built out of you're presenting this. Do I believe you? How do the sort of parameters of this fit together? I'm still really exploring this space. I'm hoping at some point in time. I know there's a tremendous anxiety at universities a lot of the time when they hire someone and the person has an established research record, it's like, can we trust this person? Are we hiring someone who's a terrible liability? Because the cases that that I think are news and everyone else thinks are horrific, it's all the cases of science gone bad. Universities can look at that and go, well, how can we do due diligence on a person? How can we do due diligence on a person's research record? And they could ask me, they haven't yet, but I'm trying to figure out a structure by which they can ask me to do that, because there's a point in time where even silly research fraud affects everyone, because in that instance, it's taking a job, one of the very few jobs in many cases, away from someone who doesn't have a fabricated research record. And that's really, I mean, I'm sure everyone feels just the central injustice of that as I'm explaining it to you. That shouldn't happen. And it could not happen to a very high degree of fidelity if someone would ask me to do that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to get them to ask me to do it. So, I mean, this is sort of scratching the surface of what's really possible. Consulting is hard, because you have to be your own parachute at any given point in time. You have to be able to figure things out very quickly, and you have to know a tremendous amount about what you're doing, and then you have to give confidence to people who are dealing with you, and you have to work extremely quickly, and that's why people pay you. It's exactly the same. But when you have a larger consulting firm who make much more money than I do, and they'll be doing exactly the same thing, flying somewhere on a Monday, solving problems by a Thursday, going to an airport bar, having a beer, flying home, falling asleep, and then doing it is high stakes. But yeah, there is a place where scientific diligence turns into consulting relationships. I think this is much more interesting to us than other people, Tim.
Like, there's got to be someone out there. I just, I have ongoing questions about the expansion of this, but maybe they can wait till the end, because I think it's time for Christina to say something. Louisa, do you want to ask something to Christina?
I'm sure. I guess, yeah, either can answer, but I was keen to hear in a bit more detail when you started your current role, you Christina, and user experience. I imagine you would have met many people from different backgrounds. As you mentioned, there's a lot of people in your field that do have doctoral level training at a university, but coming into your particular experience, were there particular skills that you brought from, I guess, academia that you felt that you were really bringing uniquely to your team, or that really helped you in the role?
Yeah, definitely. I think having done a PhD, what is it like? You're someone who's very comfortable in gray areas, and I think that's important. And yeah, like a lot of people come in and they just want to do X, Y, Z, and they want something that's very clear cut. But when you've done a PhD, someone can give you a problem, and you're like, I'm comfortable with understanding what this problem is and understanding what are the potential solutions for it. So I think that was a big plus. And when I was hired, my manager actually did say it was very difficult to find someone who has that skill set. And the critical thinking as well. That's very important. And just like having done a PhD, you can just pick up anything and learn. So that was something that I found that I didn't have to learn. So the research part of it, I didn't have to learn much. I just could pick it up, run with it. What I had to learn was the business side of things, stakeholder management, and how to work in a team. I think that was the biggest learning curve for me. Yeah.
What about you, James?
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
I wish I'd said all of that. That's shorter and more concise and pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I'll add one tiny thing. Given that everything that Christina said is just true, and I agree with it completely, people are often surprised by how well post-PhD people transition into startups, because you have a lot of open-ended problems. You're used to, like, the environment that it's in is more related than you might think. That depends on the startup, of course. And when you are stuck with an intractable problem by yourself a lot of the time, because there are few people there and you do not have a lot of resources, that training becomes extremely useful. The thing I think that changed for me was the attitude, which is more so like, let's see if we can get it done in 2 weeks, as opposed to, I think this will probably take 3 months. That's what I expect. It's more sort of like, all right, let's see if we can just set its shoes on fire, figure out what happened. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, you change strategy. That's a good question.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Scott, I've just noticed that it seems to be only us, the panel and the host, that can see the webinar chat. So you might need to open the Q&A for people to be able to ask questions from who are attending.
Yeah, it's all set up so that all the attendees can actually send you guys questions, on the chat. But they can't send chat between themselves. So if somebody who's attending, if you could just send a quick, even if you just say, oh yes, we can chat with you in the chat, that'd be great. And if we don't see anything come through, then I'll put the question and answer on. Let's see.
Yeah, and we're in the last 5 or so minutes of our webinar today. I think we've covered a lot and got a really good perspective of both of your journeys and some of your experiences, which has been very helpful. I guess one question that we did have in advance was, is there anything in particular about academia that you miss looking back?
Oh, my answer is quite concise. Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, not really. I think in the first year I sort of missed like all the traveling, I guess the traveling and then the conference. But yeah, no, I'm not missing working on weekends or all that stuff. So I have to say though, there's like a big misconception in academia that industry jobs are stable. They are not. Redundancies happen very often, So, and that's something to be aware of. At least I think when I joined my first company, there was a big redundancy round, and I was like, at least when you have fundings for 2 years, you know where you'll be. And then in industry, it's unclear. Sometimes it can happen just overnight. Your job might be gone overnight. There's also, I think, a misconception that once you get to industry, you have no learning. That's not true as well. There's a lot of development out there. I think I have probably have had a chance to work more on my development more than I did when I was in academia. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like I'd miss the students, but if I left academia, but possibly because I've got a continuing position, so my job is stable, and also I do a fair bit of teaching. I think both of you have mainly worked in postdoc roles where you weren't actively involved in teaching and supervision. There's a lot of things I wouldn't miss about academia. I was gonna ask a very quick sort of practical question. So both of you a couple of times have mentioned LinkedIn. I know James has posted on LinkedIn about using LinkedIn. And is there anything about that you don't hate and you find really useful? Because when I first got on LinkedIn, I absolutely hated it. But I can see how it actually ends up being more important for people outside of academia. So James, could you just mention that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. That is actually a very good point. When you move to any given city, you look around, maybe you like the weather, maybe you like the people, maybe you like the neighborhoods, maybe you like the bars, maybe you don't like any of those things, maybe it's really terrible. And then when you move to another one, you have exactly the same experience over and over again. And then you very quickly realize that more or less everywhere is what you make it. And there are 6 people who very much want to be drinking on your couch at one Tuesday. You just need to find them. It's 2 places that you really want to go out to, and you really need to find those. And that is exactly how I think about every form of social media. People wish it to inform and entertain and add things to their sort of professional life, and they have absolutely no desire to curate it or engage with it at the time. LinkedIn is extremely powerful as a way of meeting people, as a way of being exposed to ideas, but also to be able to read the room If there's 1,000 people obsessed with something that doesn't work, that is particularly useful to know. Other people's misconceptions are powerful things to know as well. And it's all there, it's all laid out. You just have to find the right amount of people and curate them. People want to add me because I mean I do a lot of public facing stuff. People want to add me to their LinkedIn all the time. And I almost always do because it doesn't cost me anything and it's not a bad thing. And I might meet someone that I like. And that just happens a lot. It's also incredibly as a social network because there's so much of it is total nonsense. I mean, it's much stronger language in a different event, believe me, but a lot of it is total nonsense, and people are posting it because they feel like they should be seen. You can remove all of those people one at a time till eventually you remove, trust me, hundreds of individual people. And you'd be surprised at how the content goes up and changes. If you talk to someone, the algorithm immediately goes, oh, this happened to me the other day. You had a sensible conversation with a professor of biostatistics who works in Denmark. And now the notifications go, do you want to know what he just said about whether or not you're allowed to do multi-level modeling like that? I go, turns out I do, because he'll know more about that than I will, because I don't know very much. The thing that's most powerful about it, though, I'm not an evangelist for social media at all. But the thing that's very powerful about LinkedIn is that it will take what you've done, and if people like it because it isn't the same garbage that they see everywhere else, it will just push it to a lot of people. It will also do that for weeks at a time. Everything else sinks without a trace, and because there's so much fluff on it, it's a place where people can find you. In general, we wildly undersell the value of social media for being able to meet people where you can help each other rather than just share cat memes. There are people who want to talk to you. There are people who want to give you things. I have been on the other side of this many, many, many times. I want to hire someone in the next 6 weeks who can do this thing. Where do I look? The answer is not put a job on. If you put a job on LinkedIn, you have it as an ad, you have more than 100 responses in the first probably 90 minutes these days. And then you have to go through and say no to all of them. It's much easier to go out and find people, and people who are available to be found often get found.
Thank you so much, James. I'm just yeah, we're really close to the end of the hour. So thank you. That was a very great link as well. Just reminding you that anyone who wants to connect with us as the Brain Science the EMCR network, you can do so on our website and our LinkedIn. I'll just quickly share that again. So that's there. We will also be putting up the recording of today's panel on our page, so that can be available for anyone in your network that's missed out, and we'll probably put them on the LinkedIn as well, I imagine, once that recording is ready to post. With that, I would like to thank so much Christina and James for their time, for being so open about their experiences and being very genuine in how you've shared your journey, and I think given us a lot of things to think about and some really great insights into life outside the bubble. So thank you both again so much.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
It's perfectly okay. You asked very nicely, so I was really happy to. I hope it's useful. If there's people out there who want to follow something up, I'm quite findable. If you actually want to ask me about some element of it, you will not find that difficult.
Likewise, find me on LinkedIn.
I forgot to spruik at the beginning that James also is one of the two members of a long-running podcast called Everything Hurts, HERTZ, which has been going for how many years now, James?
7.
7 years, and
maybe,
is great to listen to when you're cycling to work if you want to laugh a lot and look like an idiot. So I frequently do listen to it as I'm cycling to work, James. And
I blow off a lot of steam on my podcast, so I'm not the mild-mannered, pleasant person you see before you.
He swears a lot. I love it.
It's yeah.
Oh, great.
Take the
Great
boy out of the
plug-in.
country.
Top notch. Thanks so much, everybody, and thanks also to Scott for helping organize this
Yes.
and being persistent in his emails to those of us who don't answer our emails very often.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and stay tuned for our next event. Thanks everyone. We'll close the meeting now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.